Hello and welcome to our phonics training. Normally I would do this to you face to face, but obviously that hasn't been possible this year, so I wanted to make sure I still offered a bit of training. If there's anything at the end that you don't know the answer to, then please do get in touch with school and we'll give you some help. So early literacy is taught through a combination of strategies, but the most significant one that we use is phonics. There are many phonics schemes, but we base the structure of our teaching and learning in school around a document called Letters and Sounds. Phonics teaching in Letters and Sounds is broken down to 6 phases. Phase 1 is usually covered in preschool settings, and it centres around listening skills and being able to tune into and identify different sounds. So things like knowing the difference between the sound of an aeroplane and the sound of a car, being able to identify which instrument is being played behind a screen even though the children can't see it. This helps them to then tune into letter sounds when they get introduced to them in phase 2. So phase 2 is normally where we start at the beginning of reception. And it's when children learn the bulk of their individual letters and the sounds that they make. So these letters are divided into sets that help the children to explore using words as soon as possible, so they're not in alphabetical order. For example, sets 1 and 2 cover S, A, T, P, I, N, M, D, and that gives the children the tools they need to build and read lots of words. So this is our sound map with all the phase 2 sounds on in the order that they're taught. And we've got some examples of some words here, so we've got some word cards. So all of these words, the idea is that the children can make, read, play with, identify words like this as soon as possible, and also within phase 2 they'll start to be able to read short captions and sentences using the sounds that they get introduced to. This helps the children to feel confident and motivated to practice their newfound literacy skills. It gets them excited about having a go at starting to write, and text generally stops being such a mystery during phase 2. Phase 3 covers the remaining individual letters and their sounds. So there are some letters and sounds like the V, and the X, X, which aren't as commonly used in the words that the children will be reading and writing, so that's why they're in phase 3 rather than phase 2. But the children get introduced to the remaining individual letters and sounds, plus some digraphs and trigraphs. So a digraph is where 2 letters come together to make one sound. Sometimes a digraph is 2 of the same letter, and there are some of those in phase 2, like the double L at the end of hill would be it all, so they only make one sound even though there's 2 of them. But in phase 3, a lot of the digraphs are making a completely new sound. So for example, this one here, the S on its own makes a S, and the H on its own makes a H, but when they're next to each other they make a completely new sound, which is sh. And the children learn to recognise these digraphs and trigraphs, which are when 3 letters make one sound, and identify them in words and use them in their reading and their writing. Phase 4 doesn't introduce any new sounds, but it works on the children using the letters and sounds that they've learned so far to build longer words. So at school we look at the children moving from reading and writing CVC words, which stands for consonant, vowel, consonant, so things like cat, dog, hat, big, to longer words, so CVCC words like sand, CCVC words like trap, and even CCVCC words like stamp. So we might play games like, this is from a yes and no game, so there are silly questions using phase 4 phonics, and the children have to read it and then they have to sort them or indicate with a sign whether or not the answer is yes or no. Okay. Then phase 5 builds on the children's secure knowledge of the previous phases, so they have to be secure on the phonics that they've learnt in phase 2, 3 and 4 to be ready for phase 5, because the phase 5 phonics teaches them the alternative ways to make certain sounds. So now that the children are secure in AI, making the A sound, then they can also learn that it's also made the A sound is also made in other words in different ways. So for example here we've got the family, so in phase 3 the children learn the sound is made with a UR, which usually comes in the middle of words, sometimes at the end, but usually, and the ER, which more often comes at the end of words, sometimes in the middle, but more often at the end. So they learn these 2 sounds, but then in phase 5 they will learn the family. So they will learn that sometimes, for example, an IR in some words, so like fir for a fir tree, So they learn that there are more than one ways to make some sound. They will also learn something called split digraphs. So I will just show you a split digraph. So for example, in the word make, you've got m, a, k, and the e on the end is what turns that into an a sound rather than an a. So we talk about split digraphs a lot, and the children will be shown this representation of the two letters being joined. Sometimes when I'm teaching the children, I talk about the e on the end is on the phone to this one, telling them what sound to make. Phase 6 mainly focuses on correct spelling, reading, fluency and grammar. So by that point the children have learned all of the building blocks of phonics, and it's about really consolidating those skills and knowing which words to use in a given context. Phonics, the benefits of phonics is that it gives the children the tools that they need to decode words that they've never seen before. So rather than having to remember all of the words that they ever see, they can come across a word they've never seen before and they can use their phonics to work out what it says. Now throughout the phases the children will also learn something called tricky words, which are words that cannot easily be decoded because not every word can be decoded using phonics. So for example, if you think about the word to, as in I went to the shops, if a child segmented and blended it, they would go t, o, to. In that word, the o makes an oo sound instead of an o sound. So tricky words are revisited again and again to help the children to remember them. I always get the children to tell me what the trick is and the tricky word. So look out for those, they'll be in your child's spellings, and there are a lot of tricky words to be spotted in reading books. That's always a really nice activity to do with children. So what can you do to help? There are several key things for you to know that will help you to support your child with their phonic development. So one of them is knowing the difference between letter names and letter sounds. It's really important that the children know the names and the sounds that letters make, but the sounds will be much more useful for them in trying to read and write words, certainly in the beginning, than the names would be. So the names are, when I say names, I'm talking about the alphabet. So A is the name of the letter, A is the sound it makes. B is the name of the letter, B is the sound that it makes. By all means, learn and practice the alphabet with your child. That's really, really important too. But it's important that the children can recognise that they're the letter names and that they can also discuss what sound the letters make. In Hedgehog's class, we do a little rhyme. So we'll say, my name is A and my sound is A. And we do that for each of the letters to try and help them to remember the link between the two. Pure sounds is one of the most important things that you could possibly do to support your child with their phonics. It's very, very common for children and adults that don't teach phonics to add an sound at the end of a letter sound. So for example, saying t instead of t. This makes it really difficult for the children to segment and blend, as then they would read the word tap. So if I write tap on this board, so they would go t, a, p, which when you blend together goes t-a-p. If they say the sounds purely, t, a, t, a, t, a, tap, then the children can blend the sounds together much more smoothly, and it's a lot easier for them to hear the word. There are videos on YouTube of people making the pure phonic sounds if you ever need to check. I will make them for you now. So we have got a, t, p, I, n, m, b, g, o, k, 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 e, a, r, h, b, f, l, s. On the back we've got j, v, w, x, y, z. Okay, so they are the pure sounds for all of the individual letters. The main thing is just avoiding putting an on the end. So if you hear your children doing that, if you could support them in correcting it. They may have been starting to try and correct anybody else doing it when they come home, because we do make a big point of the children going if they put an sound at the end of a word, or at the end of a sound, sorry. Making phonics fun. Although there is a time and a place for children to sit down with a pencil in hand, the best way for the children to remember their phonics is for them to practice their skills regularly and in fun and creative ways. So some examples of how you can encourage your child to practice their phonics might be going on a sound hunt around your living room, hiding letters on pieces of paper. You could play I Spy, asking for help writing a shopping list, anything really. If it gets the children thinking about the sounds that build the words, then it's a big benefit for the children. Read, read, read. So reading to and with your child is one of the most valuable things that you can do. In fact, reading regularly at home is linked to children succeeding across the curriculum. It doesn't just support them in their literacy. Reading a wide range of texts exposes the children to a rich vocabulary, teaches them how to extract information from the text, and of course in the process of reading books, looking at books, looking at words, they're practicing and consolidating all of those phonics skills that we're teaching them at school. We're lucky enough to have an electronic library for you and your child to use to share books, but please do take every opportunity to look at physical books as well, as the children need to learn how to handle books, holding them the right way up, turning the pages carefully, reading left to right, top to bottom, all of those sequences that we as adults just do automatically. What phonics looks like in school. So phonics is taught daily in Hedgehogs and Owls, and this learning is then consolidated through additional activities set up for the children and the adults and interactions with the children during literacy based tasks. So the children may build words using letter cubes, like these, got cubes with letters on. They might sort objects according to the sound that they start with, whether they have a particular focus sound in common, so they might kind of get all the objects with a sh sound in them, for example. One of the most useful resources is a sound mat, so that supports the children in independently verifying the sounds that they need without having to ask an adult. And then we have lots of other resources as well, so we've got things like threading letters, so the children can thread these to make words. But then there are lots of things that you can use at home that are really easy to make that you can use. So for example, we've got wooden pegs that we use a lot in Hedgehogs, and we use these to build words. So we've got, we see here, we might have pictures that they have to put the pegs in the right order to build a word. So you can see here I've made the word pan, and you can kind of jumble them up and the children can really have lots and lots of fun. It's really good for their fine motor skills as well. Something else that we use in Hedgehogs is milk bottle lids, and get a Sharpie pen. I mean, this is good for maths as well, you could put numbers on here too, but putting all your initial sounds on the bottle tops, not initial sounds, all your individual sounds, and digraphs and trigraphs even on bottle tops, and they're getting the children to rearrange them to make different words. You know, you make a word, make a mistake, get the children to be the teacher and spot the mistake that you've made, get them to teach you what they've been learning at school. It's a really, really good way to help them practice their skills. And then finally, I just wanted to give you a little rundown of terminology that you may need to know, because there are some particular phrases and words that you may hear when the children are talking to you about phonics, and they may seem a little bit alien to you. So segmenting and blending, they're the words that we use for breaking a word up into its individual sounds, and then blending is putting it back together again. Now in Hedgehogs, when we are segmenting and blending a word, so let's say the word dog, then we would say the word dog first of all. It's very important to say the word out loud so that you can hear the sounds. Then we would stretch the word out. I always talk to the children about it being a bit like a piece of bubble gum. So we would go d-og, d-og. Then we would put the sounds on our arm, starting at the top. If it's a word with 3 sounds, then we would go shoulder, elbow, wrist. But once we get onto longer words, then it's just going to have to kind of work our way down. So it would go d-og, d-og. Once the children have got confident at doing this, then they can put their hand down their arm and blend the sounds together. So when their hand hits that kind of button point, they make the sound. So d-og, d-og, dog. Then they can have a go at writing the word. So the children in school are getting into the habit of breaking the word down into all of the sounds before they attempt writing it. They can use a sound mat, or they could use things like bottle tops to build the word as well before they write it, so that they feel really confident before having a go, rather than just putting a pen in the hand and them having a bit of a panic because they're not quite sure what to do. So that's segmenting and blending. Digraph, as we've talked about, so that's 2 letters working together to make one sound. So anything from kind of A in rain, or th and for thumb or them, that one makes 2 different sounds. and it's actually one of the more complicated sounds for the children to make. Lots of children start school saying f instead of th, so they would say thumb instead of thumb, and it is really important to try to support the children in correcting that, because otherwise when they then come to doing their writing, they'll start the word thumb with an F, or Thursday, for example, would be Thursday. So just trying to support the children with saying that sound correctly would be really, really helpful. And then there is another digraph that makes two sound, which is the double O, which in some instances is an oo, like in moon, and in some instances is an oo, like in book. Trigraphs, 3 letters making one sound. There are less of those, and they are notoriously more difficult for the children to remember. So just keeping an eye out for those, and talking about those wherever possible. Split digraphs, we obviously talked about earlier, so in words like make, home, time, they're all vowels, so it's those vowels, and the vowel is changed, the sound it makes is the same as the name, so an I makes an I sound, an O makes an O sound, a makes a U sound. And then pseudo word, so made up words, nonsense words, alien words is kind of like what they may be referred to as. We do use the word pseudo word in school. It just means a word that isn't a real word, but it's a very good way for the children to practice their phonics skills. So we might have something like a monster or an alien, and we get them to write a made up language, and as long as the children can tell me what it is that they've written, they can identify the sounds that they've used, and they can segment and blend them, it doesn't matter that it's not a real word. It's a really good way for them to practice their knowledge. Phoneme is the sound, the shortest unit of sound that a letter makes. Grapheme is the written representation of a sound. So for example, if I say S right now, you can't see it. You know what letter represents that sound, you can hear it, but you can't see it. If I write this on the board, right now, you know what that represents, but you can't hear it. So that's the grapheme, and S is the phoneme, but they work together as a team. And then tricky words we've talked about, so they are words that can't easily be decoded using phonics. I hope that's been helpful. I know it's been a bit of a whistle stop. It's been very strange for me talking to an iPad for 17 minutes. But if there's anything that I haven't included in the video, or that you would like some clarification on, or if you would like any extra support with your child doing their phonics at home, and especially around kind of reading, then please do let the school know, and we'll be more than happy to help you. Okay, thank you ever so much. Bye.